Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavama Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhagavana Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhagavana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Shiva Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So welcome to Nectar of Devotion, Chapter 1, and let's begin with the invocation prayer to the six Goswamis. Together with me, if you please. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipuno Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padada Vinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopala Go. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. So, this chapter 1 is the first wave that we are encountering, and it deals with this, the characteristics of pure devotion. So, generally, if we aspire for something, we ought to know what it exactly is. We have to have some type of description. For example, Prabhupada gives the example, if you want to buy a mango, if you want to buy gold, and you go into a mango shop, and the seller, he shows you a golden mango, and he says, this is golden, this is gold. If you do not know what gold really looks like, you don't know its characteristics, etc., you may just buy the mango thinking you bought gold, but actually it's just simply a golden mango. So similarly, the goal of human life, we have all understood by now, is to develop pure devotion towards Radha and Krishna. And in order to understand this, Srila Rupa Goswami, who has tasted this pure devotion, is now educating us about the different characteristics of pure devotion so that we're not confused of what path we should follow, what symptoms we should be experiencing, etc. So this chapter begins with Lord Kapila explaining how pure devotional service is actually free for the desire of the different types of liberation. So generally, when there is some difficulty, we look for an escape, right? Now, in this material world, we go through so many difficulties, and that will be discussed just now. But the desire to get out or to become liberated from this existence can fall into different categories. One is to become one with the Lord, or Sayujya Mukti. So, in which planet does one become one with the Lord? When one merges into the Brahma Jyoti, or the impersonal effulgence of the Lord, which is the light that emanates from his body. So some aspirants on the path of devotion aspire to become one with the Lord, and thereby they will end up in the Brahma Jyoti. Then the second type of liberation that people may aspire for is to live on the same planet as the Lord, which is known as Salokya Mukti. So, what are the benefits of living in the same planet as the Lord? You can offer devotional service to the Lord. You be in his association, right? It's a good aspiration, but on the pure, what is the defect with that? Do you have any idea?
Be on the planet but not serve.
You can be on the planet but not serve. So close physical proximity is not a criteria for pure devotion. If Krishna sends you to hell and you obey his order, Jo Agya Krishna, and you go happily to hell to execute whatever he wants you to do, then that is a higher principle, because you're giving up your desire and you're accepting Krishna's desire. To have the same features of the Lord, Sarupya Mukti. You see in this picture, nicely illustrated here, which planet is that? Vaikuntha. In Vaikuntha, all of the residents have the four-arm form of Vishnu. They're bluish in complexion. They wear the same attire as Krishna, Lord Vishnu. But Lord Vishnu is distinguished by his Srivat's mark, Stuba jewel, peacock feather. Then to enjoy the same opulences as the Lord, Sarshti Mukti, right? To live as a companion of the Lord, Samipya Mukti. These are different aspirations, 5 types of aspirations that pure devotion is devoid of. So, in Chapter 1, after that paragraph in the introduction, pure devotional service is described by having 6 characteristics. So this entire chapter will take us through the different 6 characteristics that are briefly mentioned here in these 2 slides in greater depth. So I won't explain them as we go on these slides. We're just simply reading them, and then we go into the discussion thereafter. Pure devotion brings immediate relief from all kinds of material desire. Kleshagni. Pure devotional service is the beginning of all auspiciousness. Subhada. Number 3, pure devotional service automatically puts one in transcendental pleasure. Sandrananda Vishesh Atma. Then number 4, pure devotional service is rarely achieved. Sudurlabha. Number 5, those in pure devotional service deride the conception of liberation. Moksha Laguta Krita. Pure devotional service is the only means to attract Krishna, Krishna Karshani. So, what is Kleshagni? Kleshagni, as you can see, means the relief from all material distress. So material distress actually has a root cause. And the root cause of all types of distresses, this material world is allowing us to experience. The separation from Krishna has put us in this situation where all of these material distresses are so familiar with us, birth after birth, endeavor after endeavor to enjoy separately from Krishna only leads us to this. So the first one is bija, material desire, papam, sinful act, and that leads to suffering. But material desire and sinful act, which lead to the material distresses, have a root cause, and that root cause is ignorance. Ignorance of what? Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada will soon explain how this root can be severed. In order to get rid of a problem, we all know that if we simply chop a weed, it may grow again because the root is still in fertile ground. Similarly, in order to become free from these causes of material distress, which is material desire and sinful act, then we have to eliminate the root. So sinful action produces 2 sort of wings, parabdha and aparabdha. So it manifests in 2 different ways, in other words. Manifest and unmanifest. So when we become absorbed in sinful activities, two things happen with the reactions, right? It's also manifest, unmanifest. The desires are either manifest, unmanifest. The actions of sin is manifest, unmanifest. So Srila Prabhupada writes, similarly, for some of our sinful activities, we are awaiting distresses in the future, and for others which are mature, we're suffering at the present moment. Why? Because like George Harrison explains in the Chant and Be Happy book, life is like having a rope with several knots. As you go through life, you're making different knots. You're incurring karmic reaction for every action we perform. And that action will only result in suffering. So, sinful reaction leads to, as you see in this diagram, more clearly for those of you that like to picture things, unmanifest reaction. So then you have a stock of seeds from that unmanifest reaction, even though it's not actively in the forefront of your existence, then there is the seeds of sinful disposition. You feel disposed towards sinful activities. Then in the region of parabdha activities, they are manifest actions. That means the fruit of the sinful desire in the heart is already becoming manifest in action. In the unmanifest one, it stays as bijam, or the sinful desire remains as bijam. Now, sinful activity is synonymous to having a disease. When one picks up a disease in its very beginning stages, it is much easier to cure. As opposed to when the disease becomes chronic, then it is harder to cure. Now, Srila Prabhupada gives some very graphic example about this just now, but for now, we find that Devahuti, she explains that by practicing devotional service, even someone born in the lowest family of dog eaters becomes qualified to perform the highest Brahmanical activities. The behavior of those born into degraded families disqualifies them from performing Vedic sacrifices. Devahuti points out that even slight engagement in devotional service can counteract the disqualifications incurred by a low birth. One's birth is a tangible result of karma, a manifest reaction. Thus, Devahuti's statement is shastric evidence that devotional service can counteract parabdha papam, right? So, you'll find in the entire book of Nectar of Devotion, a statement is made, and then you get evidence from other scriptures by other great personalities, etc. So here, Devahuti's statement is substantiating, giving us this shastric backing that no matter how we started the race, it's how we finish it that counts. In other words, no matter what family we're born in, whatever background we surface from, however the mountain of sinful reactions, however big it is, due to our 8,400,000 repeated births in different species and all of this huge karmic bank balance, there is a ray, and indeed a very bright ray of hope for us. And that is the path of devotional service, that no matter what you were yesterday, if today you make the commitment of surrendering to Krishna, Krishna has the ability. He explains to Uddhava after this paragraph, little on in the purport, he makes an explanation to Uddhava that he is actually like devotional service unto him, Sri Krishna, is actually like a fire that can burn unlimited amounts of sin that come into it. So Krishna being unlimited, he has the power to reduce an ocean of sins that we've accumulated to the water containing the hoofprint of a calf. Not even a cow, a calf. If you see a calf's hoofprint, it's rather tiny. So what was an ocean and insurmountable becomes bearable by the mercy of Krishna. So how merciful is he? This brings to mind an example of a friend that we encountered in our devotional path when we were in the Hillbrow temple. So we had a devotee who was an expert book distributor. He would be out on the streets unfailingly every day. And he was so good. But he had the mentality that he was so fallen that Krishna consciousness may not be, he was more fallen than Krishna consciousness can help a person. So he had that limiting belief ingrained in his being. And as a result, he became attracted to a prostitute and he went off, and the devotees went to go save him. And there were a huge struggle ensued with the prostitutes and the devotees that went to save him. You still got your scar. So what happened was that devotee's mentality was so limiting because he didn't have the faith that Krishna's fire of purification is insurmountable. He's telling this to Uddhava. He's giving us hope that no matter how fallen we are, Krishna is able to pick us up. It's not that we are now so fallen that there's no hope and not even Krishna consciousness can save us. So sinful activity, Prabhupada explained, the Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sri Sanatana Goswami states, as a base metal, as base metal like bell metal can be changed to gold by chemical process, any person similarly can be changed into a Brahmana by Diksha Vidhan, the initiation process. So no matter what the condition, as soon as if one comes in contact with a bona fide spiritual master, then what happens? The spiritual master has the ability to, the bona fide spiritual master has the ability to change a person, just as base bell metal can be converted into gold. How amazing it is that Srila Prabhupada, who is our preeminent Shiksha Guru in this ISKCON movement, has demonstrated that. We find that people from all types of background came to him, and Prabhupada, by his influence, was able to transform them. He proved to us that Krishna consciousness is a process of transformation. It is not an armchair philosophy, quote unquote, in Prabhupada's words, right? It is a philosophy that can work, can actively make changes if we allow it to work within us. There are many scriptural references to substantiate this point, as you see in this picture. There's the hunter, Mugrari. Mugrari the hunter was so sinful. He would not kill animals. He would half kill them because he got joy from seeing them suffer and die. So his heart was so sinful. And many a great personality, many a compassionate person tried to stop him, to save him from such a sinful life. But Mugrari would threaten to kill them or kill them. However, Narad Muni, the purest of pure souls, encountered this sinful person, and he uttered one word. He said, "Stop!" And immediately Mugrari froze. And he himself became so shocked that who is this person, by the utterance of one word, is accomplishing what nobody else in the past has ever been able to do. So Narad Muni, goes on to ask him to go and who will take the sinful reaction, of all of his killing and sinful acts. And he explains he's a hunter, it's his livelihood. He's maintaining his family. His family obviously is going to share in the sinful reaction. He went home, Narad Muni told him to go and ask them. He went home, he asked them, and they said, no, we're not taking any sin. It's your responsibility. So he came back and he surrendered to Narad Muni and he became a pure Vaishnav. So much so that when Angira Muni and Narad Muni were walking once in the forest and they encountered him, he was not just approaching them directly, he was actually walking in a sort of zigzag way to prevent himself from trampling upon the ants. From a killer of such a gruesome lack of compassion to a person who will actually save an ant. Prabhupada had the same effect by his pure potency on people. There was a tennis player, Peter Burwash. You may have heard of him. Apparently, he was world famous. So Peter Burwash had a meeting with Srila Prabhupada in which Srila Prabhupada spoke to him many leadership principles. And Peter Burwash, I think he compiled a book about it. You know the title of the book? So he compiled a book. It would be nice to get hold of the book. And Peter Burwash, in his final tennis tournament, championship tournament, as you may well understand, in tennis, it is very important where you stand because there's a certain strategy of how the ball will move, etc. Peter Burwash, while the entire world was watching him and banking on him winning this tournament, which was a championship, he relocated. And the reason he relocated was because he saw some ants and he didn't want his winning to be at the cost of life of others. So that's the effect. Now, you may think that's so wonderful, but what about us? Prabhupada has had the same effect on us, right? How many of you may find this to be true in your lives, that prior to coming to prior to coming in touch with Srila Prabhupada's knowledge, how uncompassionate we were, that we would go to a butcher shop and say, I want the breast of that animal, the thigh of that animal, the head of that animal, right? But Srila Prabhupada, as soon as you come in contact with his teachings via his books or his sincere servants, etc., somehow, if you establish a connection, immediately there's a type of awakening, and it's so easy to develop a higher taste and give up the lower taste. That the potency is there. So papam, sinful activity, stands no chance in the way of devotional service. In terms of the reactions manifesting. So then we said there's manifest reactions and there's unmanifest reactions. How do they cause suffering? So the unmanifest reactions, aparabdha, in this stage, the reaction is completely unmanifest and has no perceptible effect. In other words, outwardly glowing, inwardly, the seed of sin still remains. Kutam is sinful proclivity. In this stage, the reaction evolves into a psychological disposition towards sin. So from lying as seed, when it's not eradicated in that stage, while it's in the heart, then it moves to the manas. One starts to meditate on sinful activities. One establishes the proclivity for sin. Then bijam, in this stage, sinful proclivity evolves into a specific desire to commit a particular sinful action. And Prabhupada will expand on this just now. Then the fourth stage is the manifest sinful reaction, parabdha. In this stage, the sinful desire causes one to commit a sinful action and suffer the concomitant reaction. Now, we have just finished 2 books ago in this gathering, the Nectar of Instruction. The same author, Srila Rupa Goswami, gives few examples there. He explains how a thief, he may steal, then he gets punished, different. In Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction, he explains the different levels of intellectual capacity of human beings. So he says the first level, a thief steals, he gets punished. He doesn't steal again. The second level, the thief steals, gets punished, and continues to sin. Then the third level, he steals, he gets punished, and then what happens?
He hurts years not to steal.
Oh, the first one, thank you. The first one, he just simply by hearing sin is bad, stealing is bad, he avoids it. The next class, he goes, he steals, he has to experience it, then only he learns. The third one, he steals, gets punished, and he still goes and steals again. Right? So here, Srila Prabhupada explains a different example. So Prabhupada will give us quite a graphic example. As a result of some sinful act, a man is destined to become a thief and suffer punishment. However, this reaction is not immediately felt. It is stored for a future birth. This stage is aparabdha. That what happens? The thief steals and suffers punishment, but the desire still remains. In his next life, the reaction begins to manifest, and an almost unnoticed proclivity towards dishonesty and cheating. This is the stage of kutam. So all the samskaras is registered where? In our subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. It gets carried into the next existence. So as you sow in this life, it paves the way for our future existence. This proclivity gradually intensifies and eventually manifests an explicit desire to steal. This is the stage of bijam. So can you see how the past samskaras is the architect of our future? Finally, this desire causes the man to commit theft, undergo consequential suffering. This is the stage of parabdha. It's manifest. From unmanifest, through these few stages, it gets into manifest. So it's therefore so important to check it while it is in the seed. While there's simply a thought, a desire, when one recognizes this, it's important to stop it there and then. Devotional service eradicates all four stages of sinful reaction in chronological order. First a parabdha, next kutam, then bijam, and finally parabdha. So what happens is that this sinful proclivity now manifesting may seem to be such an intense thing to deal with, but simply by the process of devotional service, it can immediately become null and void. There was a devotee who was being arrested in Prabhupada's time for drug dealing. He was called to go and serve his prison sentence. And then he came to excuse himself from Srila Prabhupada's presence. And Prabhupada asked him what he had done, and he said that he was involved in drugs. Prabhupada said, oh, I was also a drug salesman. Prabhupada was a pharmacist, right? And Prabhupada made light of the situation. But it was so amazing that that devotee went to prison. Many devotees have noted and spoken of their history of the early days in ISKCON, like in the time of the Juhu construction. The devotees were at one point in the struggle between Srila Prabhupada and Mr. Nair. The devotees were imprisoned, and they had their Sunday feast in prison, in meditation. They, instead of being overcome by this negative circumstances, the negative atmosphere of the prison, they actually turned it into a Vaikuntha place. And it was an amazing thing how simply by devotional service, all distress can be put completely off. Then Sukadev Goswami points out that bijam, desire, that austerity, charity, and performance of ritualistic ceremonies for counteracting sinful activities are the recommended processes. But that by performing them, one cannot remove sinful desire seed from the heart, as was the case of Ajamil in his youth. Ajamil was born a Brahmana. Ajamil was educated in Vedic principles. He was the chief assistant to his father, his esteemed father, to perform all of the yagyas, as is recommended here for wiping out sinful activities. However, when Ajamil simply saw, while he was out fetching flowers for the worship of his father's puja, he simply saw a lusty woman and a man with their bodies smeared with spices, as is in Vedic culture. He became fallen. The desire to become like them sprouted in his heart. Thereby, he got that prostitute and made her the queen of his house and made his wife the maidservant of the prostitute. He went on to have about 11 children, and he named the 11th child Narayan. And at the end of life, he called out the name Narayan and he became saved, right? And we know that from the 9 processes of Bhakti, Shravanam, and Kirtanam are one of the first and second in the list, and they are able to wipe out sin right from the heart, as Lord Chaitanya has given to us in his prayer, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, right? That the heart becomes cleansed. So Srila Prabhupada summarizes the quotation from Padma Purana, explaining how pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is the highest enlightenment, which enlightenment, when such enlightenment is there, it is just like blazing forest fire, killing all inauspicious snakes of desire. In this quotation, Srila Prabhupada expresses the Sanskrit word avidyam as desire. One usually translates avidyam as ignorance. Accordingly, Srila Prabhupada clarifies, similarly, the blazing fire of Krishna consciousness is so strong that the snakes of ignorance are immediately killed. How difficult it is to kill a poisonous snake. How difficult it is to kill a whole lot of poisonous snakes. How easily a forest fire can consume all of it is synonymous to the practice of devotional service, that we may not even be able to quell every single desire of sin that we have from our past samskaras in our very core, but devotional service is able to pull this out. So avidya, the root cause of suffering. The root cause of suffering is avidya, ignorance of one's true identity as Krishna's eternal servant. In ignorance, one acts as an enjoyer and suffers the concomitant reactions. Srila Prabhupada says, as long as one is ignorant about his identity, he's sure to act wrongly and thereby become entangled in material contamination. So what is the fundamental principle of uprooting avidya? Is to understand one's own identity. That what is our identity? Jivera Swarup Hoy, Krishnera Nityadas. That we are eternal servants of Krishna. If we have the wrong identity, what will happen? It is like taking a plate of food to a hungry man's reflection and trying to feed the reflection. Not understanding the real identity of the suffering person. So similarly, we are all suffering due to our ignorance because of our separation. The root cause is our misunderstanding of our true identity. So we have to wake that up. Now, going back to sinful activities and the root of sin within our very core, The performance of yagya and all of the activities that was mentioned in the Ajamil slide, these are actually compared to the mad elephant in a very, very well manicured garden, right? What happens if you let a wild elephant in a well manicured garden? He will not appreciate the beauty of the garden and he will just go rampant, right? Madly. So, no matter how much one tries to cultivate good qualities, if one avoids the process of bhakti, then it is very hard to quell all the other desires that will keep surfacing. The conclusion of this section of Kleshagni is that devotional service eradicates sinful reactions, nullifies sinful desires, counteracts material proclivities, and most importantly, it uproots ignorance. Therefore, it is the only efficient and effective way to achieve permanent relief from all suffering. So, this is the power of devotional service. Krishna is known as Apapavidam. What is Apapavidam? He is very prophylactic. What does that mean? He is like the sun that can shine on a puddle of urine and never be affected by the dirt, the impure contamination of the urine. However, it can have a positive effect on the urine and purify that place. So no matter how dirty our hearts is, if we take shelter of that personality, he can have the same effect on our existence. Then we come to so what does pure devotional service do? The bright light about accepting pure devotional service into our life is that it can bring relief from all distress. That was the first one. The second one, subhada. Pure devotional service brings all auspiciousness into one's life. How often it is that we are looking for something auspicious in this dark and dreary existence. It is really something to aspire for, is it not? The first characteristic is it relieves us from suffering. And the second characteristic is that it brings all auspiciousness, subhada. These are related. As suffering decreases, auspiciousness increases. Okay, you can imagine a seesaw, right? When suffering is going down and what's coming up? Auspiciousness. So when they cannot exist on the same plane. Suffering and auspiciousness cannot. One time, His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj gave a very nice example. He said, spiritual life is like sitting in a space rocket. You're either going up at high speed or you're going down at high speed. You can't hover in a space rocket. So similarly, in terms of diminishing of sinful, gaining relief from suffering due to the distressful existence of living separate from Krishna, we can actually, when that is reduced, auspiciousness takes its place, right? If your cup is full, I can't fill it anymore. You got to empty it out for me to put something else in it. You know the example Srila Prabhupada gives? When the monkey holds on to the gulab jamun, he gets trapped in the cutting of the pumpkin by the farmer, more like a banana. The Indian monkeys like gulabs also. So they hold on to anything that's edible. And because they hold on, the hand that went in through that space now can't come out. So you got to let go, and then you can free oneself. Otherwise, you caught in the grips of Maya. So these two things are related. When one goes down, the other comes up. Auspiciousness rises. We all want auspiciousness to rise, distress to become subdued. These two characteristics fully manifest at the stage of Nishta. What are the 9 stages? Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartana Vritti, and Nishta. So Nishta is the stage of steadiness. So when one encounters this steadiness. We'll go through these 9 stages later on in the Nectar of Devotion course, from Shraddha to Prem, and each one will be become more clarified. So here it is just briefly mentioned. These 2 characteristics become fully manifest at the stage of Nishta, steadiness. One should understand that he is not yet become steady in sadhana bhakti if he is not being freed from the suffering and manifesting all auspicious qualities. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya in our line, has recommended that on every Ekadashi, what should we do? We should do an inventory of our spiritual life. So we should try to find out on Ekadashi every fortnight, how much have I improved? Am I really the same person? Have I done the same thing yesterday, today, and tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing? Or have I actually increased my spiritual understanding? Have I made a concerted effort for self-improvement, for raising of my consciousness so that I could become free of avidya, understand my position in relationship to Krishna? If auspicious qualities are not developing, then one can ascertain that actually I'm not yet past kleshagni. Material distress is still a very great part of my life. Now, just to pause and mention something in a sort of tangent at this point, it does not mean that devotees do not go through suffering, right? Devotees also go through suffering. But the suffering of a devotee is sometimes for purification and sometimes for glorification. Arjuna went through suffering because Krishna wanted to glorify him. His devotion, his steadfastness, his ekeha kuranandanaha. Srila Prabhupada went through suffering. Is it not true that he had 2 heart attacks on the way to saving all of us in the Western world? He went through so much of suffering, with Mr. Nair in so many different circumstances in his pure service, pure attempts to serve Krishna. This was not due to past sinful reactions, etc. This was simply Krishna's way of glorifying this devotee. That alone he sat in Tompkins Square Park without anyone sending him a mridanga from India, right? And he was able to give birth to Lord Chaitanya's movement in the Western world just by his own endeavor, his own purity. And if you see the footage of Prabhupada in Thompson Square Park, how purely is he chanting? There's a video clip of that, on social media. And you'll find that Prabhupada is not concerned about the crowd. His eyes are so closed. He's giving it his best shot. His connection is like so deep there. That's why, just as Narad Muni mentioned, stop is one word, could stop everything. What the whole American government could not be successful in converting the hippies, in bringing about transformation and elevating their consciousness. Srila Prabhupada started that in Thompson Square Park and liberated these souls in an amazing way. So Subhada, all auspiciousness. Something cannot be all auspicious without meeting 4 criteria. So if we want to know if this all auspiciousness has occurred in our lives, we have to remember these 4 points, right? These 4 ways to gauge that. Is our activity benefiting everyone? Does it attract everyone? Is our actions is it producing good qualities in us? Are our activities bestowing superior happiness? If not, then one has, with all humility, surrender to taking deeper shelter of the process of pure devotional service. You have to stay in the shower with greater intensity when the dirt is a bit too thick. Devotional service meets all four of these criteria. No other practice can make this claim. Not piety, not the performance of yoga, not the performance of fire yagyas, nothing that is separate from pure devotional service, bringing exclusive pleasure to Krishna, can actually meet this four criteria.
So activities can be auspicious.
Yeah.
And they can meet one of the criteria.
Yes.
But all auspicious activities need to meet four.
Four, exactly. So certain processes may meet one of the criteria, it is incomplete. Complete auspiciousness, subhada, only comes from pure devotional service. How pure devotional service becomes manifest in the heart of the living being, etc., is still our forthcoming attraction in this journey of nectar of devotion. Subhada is all auspicious. Srila Prabhupada explains that the power of devotional service is so amazing that it has the ability to accomplish what the United Nations has failed to accomplish. He explains that the United Nations, instead of bringing about unity, love, and peace in society, has unfortunately created more and more division. So Prabhupada states this in this part of the Nectar of Devotion. And then he explains that pure devotional service can attract anyone. Then that statement has to be substantiated. Padma Purana confirms that the all-attractive and all-beneficial nature of pure devotional service, a person who is engaged in pure devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, is to be understood to be doing the best service to the whole world and to be pleasing everyone in the world. In addition to human societies, pleasing even the trees and animals, because they are also becoming attracted by the movement. This reminds me of when Srila Prabhupada was in John Lennon's estate. There was a thunderstorm on the way, and Prabhupada was walking through the estate. And then he paused at one point and he hugged the trees in John Lennon's estate. And the devotees that were accompanying him were like raising their eyebrows, just like some of you just did when you heard me say that. And they were wondering, what is Prabhupada seeing in these trees? We just see them as trees. Prabhupada went and hugged them. And then the storm brewed, that those trees were knocked down and they left their body. Prabhupada, by his purity, he could see beyond the body of the tree, the soul inside, and he could help that soul in its journey forth. Here you see a picture of what was actually part of a video clip that is very famous on social media. How many of you have seen this? This dog, it meets the devotees on Harinam in the video, and he actually goes and he pays his pranams to all the devotees singing the kirtan. And the devotees go and they dance, and the dog dances with them. And then he lies down and he listens to the Maha Mantra. Right in the midst of the city, this dog does that. Because devotional service is so potent that it's not limited to the Brahmanas, a person born in a South Indian Brahmin family. It is able to reach deep within the layers of covering to that of a dog, right? Srila Prabhupada elaborates by mentioning how Lord Chaitanya attracted all the animals in Jarikanda forest to dance and chant Hare Krishna, benedicting them with sublime bliss. His Holiness Janananda Swami, a very nice sannyasi in our movement, wrote a book. I don't know if it's still in circulation or it has been reprinted or oversold or whatever. But if you ever lay hands on this book, it's called Animals in Krishna Consciousness. And I remember when we saw it, we bought like so many copies of it because we gave it to whoever we encountered after that. It was so inspiring. There were stories there of the cow Vishaka in Mauritius that Vishaka was coming every day and she was listening to the every Sunday she would come to the Sunday feast program, and she would have sadhu sangha. She would listen to the class, the kirtan, take prasadam, and then she would go. And at some point in time, to cut a long story very short for the purpose of this class, Vishaka, the temple president announced that they were relocating, that they were going to change venue the next week, and Mangal Arti would be held at a certain venue the next Sunday. So the next Sunday, there was a knocking on the door, and when he opened it, lo and behold, there were no other devotees but Vishaka. She came to that venue and she attended the program. And soon after that, some farmer became jealous of her because her owner wasn't selling. So he threw acid on her. So she sustained a lot of injury from the acid. So she stayed away from the devotees. In the meantime, Vishaka used it as an opportunity to increase the Sankirtan mission. She preached to the other cows. So at a point in time when she healed, she came back to the program with a group of friend cows, and they started attending the program regularly. So like that, this book compiled by Janananda Swami has got many evidences to substantiate this point that Krishna consciousness can penetrate any bodily covering, that of a tree, that of a dog, that of a cow, that of an elephant in the case of mad elephant in the case of this great saint Rasika Nanda. Right? You can read in the life story of Rasika Nanda. Maybe it's at a bookstore. There's a nice book like that you can either buy on Amazon or find it at your local temple. It's an amazing thing to build our faith that we as human beings have a golden opportunity. If we don't take advantage of it, all the other species are willing to overtake us in this endeavor to perfect one's existence. So we might as well simply surrender and appreciate the facility we have in this human birth. The development of saintly qualities. Just going back to the last part of the last slide, Lord Chaitanya in the Jarikanda forest, he was able to influence all of the animals also. So on a side note, there's a joke that one bhakta, he was walking in the forest and he came across a lion, a hungry lion. So the hungry lion was approaching him at fast speed. So the bhakta, he went down the full dandavats and he started to pray, please Krishna, make this lion into a devotee. Because you know what? The bhakta is compassionate. So he said, please make the lion into a devotee. You know what happened? He heard the lion come to a halt just before him. And then he heard the lion chant, Sarira Abhijya Jal, which is a prayer devotees. To be specific in your prayer for the well-being of others. That's just a joke on a side note. Subhada, development of saintly qualities. A steady devotee develops all saintly qualities. Srila Rupa Goswami authenticates this with the noted verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Yasyasti Bhakti Bhagavat Yakinchana. Persons who have unflinching faith in Krishna and are without any duplicity can develop all the good qualities of the demigods. You have the ability, you have the facility, you have the rope thrown to you, you and I. We are just hesitant to grab on. We have to psych ourselves up and become inspired to take to this path so wholeheartedly, because we can actually elevate our consciousness to developing the good qualities of even the demigods, right? And what to speak of the demigods in the heavenly planets. This process can take one even higher, much higher than the heavens. Many people think that modern education is auspicious and endows one with good qualities. Srila Prabhupada exposes this misconception. A Krishna conscious boy, even if he's not well educated, can immediately give up all illicit sex life, gambling, meat eating, and intoxication. Whereas those who are not in Krishna consciousness, although very highly educated, are often drunkards, meat eaters, sex mongers, and gamblers. Today I saw the headlines that some famous comedian, I forget his name, died. And he died all alone, fully in debt, and they found him on the floor of his one cottage, right? All the wealth in the world could not help him develop good qualities. He had 5 unsuccessful marriages, right? He was, so much into drugs. And how often we hear that people who have had so much of pious activity from their previous existence in this life take birth and earn unreal amounts of money, right? And when they do not remove the avidya, reconnect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their existence is no better than a finger severed from the hand. No matter how nice you paint the finger, massage it, exercise it, and look after it, how beautiful it looks when it's connected with the hand, how useful it is. However, when severed from the hand, it simply rots and like a dry leaf severed from a tree. Its existence is so dry. So Prabhupada is exposing modern education that no matter, and we find in our preaching, trips, that so many people complain that they pay so hefty school fees and they send their children to very, very well-known schools. But somehow the other, the desire for sinful life of illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, and intoxication is not inculcated in such beings. Only the process of Krishna Bhakti is able to make that transformation in the hearts of people, because prachar and achar of the preacher is important, as we see in the example of Srila Prabhupada, that he was able to accomplish all of this with no extra endeavor, simply by teaching people Krishna consciousness. Sure.
How is the unflinching faith? How is that related to justice?
Unflinching faith, how is unflinching faith cultivated as best as possible? We're going to come there. First of all, we have to first understand all of the qualities, and it'll inspire us. And just now in the Nectar of Devotion, the whole process, a roadmap for developing that unflinching faith will be sort of given to us. Many people think that that yoga is auspicious. Srila Prabhupada dispels this misunderstanding very clearly. Artificially, they may sit down for so-called meditation, but immediately after the yogic performance, they will engage themselves again in the activities of illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, and many other nonsensical things. But a Krishna conscious person automatically gives up all of this nonsense and develops a high character. So sinful life, all of the beej of sin becomes eradicated, we said, and subhada is on the rise, auspiciousness. So if we embrace this process, of course, when one takes to Krishna consciousness and one looks around, one shouldn't say, oh, that one is in Krishna consciousness, but you know what, there's still desire there, there's still desire there, it's so evident. No. It is all shades of gray. It's like when you enter a schooling institution, there are people in class 1, in grade 1, what's it called now, right? Grade 0, there's someone in grade 7, there's someone in grade 12, right? In my days, it was standard 10. And thereafter, you find that people are all in the same institution, they have the common goal, but they're on different levels of understanding. So this type of delineation of qualities to develop on the path of pure bhakti is applicable especially to our own self, not for us to now start judging others. And Prabhupada explains, neither modern education nor yoga are all auspicious because they fail the third criteria, sadguna, development of saintly character. So therefore, it is so important, even when one is raising the next generation of devotees, whether it be one's own children or one's students or disciples or whatever, it is important to follow up on helping them to develop saintly character, of guiding them in the right direction and inspiring them through one's own action to develop saintly character. Otherwise, we don't want to be likened to modern education, where people come and then they are not freed from these qualities. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains one should not become a mother, father, teacher, or a guru if one cannot deliver one's dependents back home, back to Godhead. Subhada, all auspiciousness, is superior happiness. There are three types of happiness. That which comes from sense gratification, which comes from liberation and Brahman realization, and that which comes from devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada, he had a disciple who was Brahman realized that came to him. And I heard that devotee speak on his experiences after meeting Srila Prabhupada. His name was Siddha Swarup. And he came and he surrendered to Srila Prabhupada together with his followers and all of his possessions. And it is now that his disciple is standing as a congresswoman for the election where Donald Trump, on the same platform as Donald Trump for 2020, is it? The US elections? Yes, Tulsi Gabbard. So her guru is Siddha Swarup. And Siddha Swarup he was Brahman realized at the time when he met Srila Prabhupada. And he explained that the knowledge that he got from Srila Prabhupada's teachings was so much more relishable than the Brahman realization he had, been experiencing, teaching, and been absorbed in. So that was like, direct perception coming from a person who had been through that route. Srila Prabhupada explains, Srila Rupa Goswami has analyzed the different sources of happiness. He has divided happiness into three categories, which are happiness derived from material enjoyment, happiness derived from identifying oneself with the Supreme Brahman, and happiness derived from Krishna consciousness. So we all know that Srila Prabhupada's programs in the West were advertised by this poster, "Stay High Forever," right? So Krishna consciousness doesn't take one to a level and then you can't go any higher, it becomes dry and you fall down. Krishna consciousness is a consistent process that we have to abide by, where the work on ourselves is a consistent thing. It's not that we come to a point where we can now sit back and say, I'm a devotee, because we find that not even the gopis who are expert in 64 arts, they don't have a master's degree or a doctorate in one thing and feel proud. They are efficiently educated in 64 arts of pleasing Lord Krishna, right? And they are at it constantly. They're working at it constantly. So there's never an end point. And it's like diving into what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls an ever-increasing ocean of bliss, that the subhada, this auspiciousness, it leads to greater and greater things. Of these, happiness of devotional service is superior. There are two reasons why. It is eternal, whereas the others are temporary, and it includes and excels the pleasures found in any other type of happiness. So they made a statement that happiness from devotional service is superior, and it is justified by this understanding that it is eternal, whereas all other happiness is temporary. And that its pleasure, it includes and excels the pleasures found in any other thing. It's like we're looking for a 10 rand we're short of a 10 rand, and Krishna is giving us a 200 rand note. How many 10 rands can you find in a 200 rand note? It will be unintelligent for us to reject the 200 rand note because we're in search of our 10 rand, right? So similarly, whatever desires we have, whatever quest for happiness that we have is like that little 10 rand. And Krishna is offering us something so much more. You know, there's that story that Srila Prabhupada gives of the lady who was carrying a bundle of dried sticks on her head. And you know how tedious that was? A huge bundle of stick balancing on a narrow head. And she was walking, and then, you know, she came under a tree branch and a bundle was dislodged, and she screamed, "Hey, Govinda!" And when Govinda appeared in front and said, "Yes, what would you want?" She said, I need the bundle of sticks to be replaced on my head. So we are in that situation. We're thinking with our limited perception, our limited vision, that this is what's going to give us happiness. How afraid are we of death, right? But Krishna's waiting for us on the other side, with the promise of so much more. If we perfect our existence, play our part in elevating our consciousness in these aspects of pure devotional service that is so nicely encouraging us here by Srila Rupa Goswami. Subhada, the only happiness of devotional service is eternal. So neither liberation, mystic perfection, nor sense gratification can bring eternal happiness. Liberation, Srila Prabhupada states that even the pleasure of liberation is not eternal, as proved by the Mayavadis who fall down and return to material activities. So it is proof enough that it is not eternal. So it's not a route that we want to follow. We don't want to go get stuck at the Brahma Jyoti, and then our own need for experiencing Ananda, which we are made up of, Sat, Chit, and Ananda. That Ananda feature is not given any chance to connect with Krishna, and thereby it becomes a dry existence and we have to fall down again. Srila Prabhupada states that the pleasure of yogic perfection is also not eternal. Srila Prabhupada elaborately shows how the yogi siddhis are essentially subtle versions of the modern material science. Thus, the pleasure they afford is also material and temporary. And you, I hope, will find some time to read up that section on your own. Prabhupada mentions all of these yogi siddhis, right? And anima siddhi, lagima siddhi, etc., right? Becoming smaller than the smallest, like Houdini, and escaping through a keyhole, fetching something from a distant place, touching the planet Mars, etc. So these are all different yogic siddhis. But the happiness they bring, Prabhupada even said that he had a teacher once who had this siddhi that he could bring a branch of pomegranates, which was not in season, and he could have it manifest there. I will say mysteriously that Srila Prabhupada, he obviously, being a pure servant of Yogeshwar, he also at different times, he manifests many siddhis, but he never got caught up in that. One time, I'm just telling you this pastime, and you can make of it whatever you want to. But His Holiness Bhakti Chiru Maharaj tells the story of one time when Srila Prabhupada sent him to the marketplace when he was cooking for Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada gave him a list of things to buy from the marketplace, which he needed to prepare for his lunch. And one of the things was bitter melon. And Maharaj forgot to buy the bitter melon. And then he ran back to the marketplace. He couldn't find bitter melon. And he was so worried, Prabhupada, when he came back from the marketplace, Prabhupada asked him, "Did you buy the bitter melon?" And I think somehow he got so shocked that he said yes. And he didn't realize he was saying yes, but actually he meant no. So then he was like frantic, running out to the DD kitchen, finding out if they have bitter melon. Devotee kitchen, do they have bitter melon? Not one bitter melon, not in season, right? At that time. So his heart was breaking because, he was feeling so incompetent that now he was going to displease Srila Prabhupada, not getting the bitter melon. And all of a sudden, he came by and he saw at the Gurukul building in the veranda, there was a nice, huge bitter melon. Just enough for Srila Prabhupada. So mysterious things happen. You can make what you want to of that. But yeah, these cities, Prabhupada likens them to the modern science. It is like giving a post-dated check. There's no guarantee of what they promise. But devotional service makes a promise of becoming relieved from material distress, re-establishing one's connection with Krishna, and going back to the spiritual atmosphere to serve Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan, however he so wishes. Srila Prabhupada says, foolishly, people who are enamored of the glimmer of modern materialistic advancement are thinking that the Krishna conscious movement is for the less intelligent men. I am better off being busy with my material comforts, maintaining a nice apartment, family, and sex. These people do not know that at any moment they can be kicked out of their material situation. Due to ignorance, they do not know that real life is eternal. The temporary comforts of the body are not the goal of life. How often it is when you're out on book distribution, and especially in my days, we would always go in devotional attire with tilak onto the streets, whether it was Pretoria or the heart of Johannesburg outside Carlton Center, or the busy Pretoria Street in Hillbrow, Sunnyside, Pretoria, different places like that. And how often it was that people would come and say, why don't you just get a job? I remember one time, one lady, I was distributing down the road in Pretoria Street in Hillbrow, and up at Exclusive Books, up from where I was standing, Kunti Devi, my Sankirtan partner, was busy distributing. And all of a sudden, one lady approached her, and with 2 heavy shopping bags, she just whacked her, and she said, why don't you just die? Because it's like her perception was we were just a nuisance on the street. And of course, her misconception was like that, because obviously she was of the mentality that Srila Prabhupada is explaining here, that all things material are more beneficial than engaging in devotional service. And there are many encounters like that one will have when one goes preaching, and that I can tell you of. But you get the point. The happiness of devotional service includes all others. Devotional service affords superior happiness because it includes and excels the pleasure found in any other type of happiness. Lord Shiva says to Parvati, my dear wife, a person who has surrendered himself at the lotus feet of Govinda and who has thus developed pure Krishna consciousness can be very easily awarded all the perfections desired by the impersonalists and beyond this, and he can enjoy the happiness achieved by the pure devotees. This shows that devotional service includes the happiness of liberation, and how apt it is that the person speaking these words is the esteemed Lord Shiva. He's glorified in a lovely verse that goes like Shri Rama Govinda Mukunda Saure Shri Krishna Narayana Vasudeva Iti Adinamamrita Panakana. And the last line, I forget the sequence, the last line explains that the name, well, the verse explains the names Shri Krishna, Govinda, Rama, Narayan are all names that are chanted constantly by Lord Shiva. And the last line begins by Bringadi. It describes Lord Shiva as the king of bumblebees. So the king of bumblebees, what does he do? He enters a lotus which opens during the daytime due to sunshine and closes at night. The whirl of the lotus being the center of nectar for the bumblebee. The king of bumblebees, he flies knowing that the lotus will close and his life will end in his pursuit of nectar. But because he wants to relish that nectar so much, it does not matter to him. Similarly, Lord Shiva, like the king of bumblebees, absorbs himself in the chantings of the names of Rama, 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 Rama on his Japamala. And here he is saying to Parvati that surrendering to Govinda is the best thing possible because it will give you happiness that is of paramount satisfaction, because he himself is relishing that. Then Prahlad Maharaj says that in light of the category of pure devotional happiness from pure devotional service includes all others. So Prahlad Maharaj, the chief amidst preachers, right? What does he say? He has something to educate us about. He says, "My dear Lord, I repeatedly pray to your lotus feet that I may simply be stronger in devotional service. I simply pray that my Krishna consciousness may be more strong and steady, because happiness derived out of Krishna consciousness and devotional service is so powerful that with it one can have all other perfections of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, even the attainment of liberation from material existence." In this Kali Yuga, you'll hear how Lord Nrsingadev next week, um, uh, during his appearance day, he comes in the mood of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right, in Kali Yuga. And Prahlad is explaining how the type of happiness that devotional service unto this Lord is so amazing that, one's need for economic development, sense gratification is all solved. Now, in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, there is a great personality that you all may have heard about by the name of Shrivas. Shrivas, he was a grihasta. He had a family to maintain. And what was he doing? Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, "Shrivas, how are you going to maintain your family?" He said, "My Lord, first I have to chant my rounds." So he would sit and simply absorb himself in the chanting of Hare Krishna, and somehow the other, all needs for economic development, etc., was all taken care of, right? And in the Japa retreat stories, there are so many devotees that have glimpses of this happening in their lives when they give priority to chanting Krishna's holy names. Everything else somehow automatically gets taken care of, right? Economic development, sense gratification, attainment of material liberation from material existence. In times of drought, in Ujjain, there was a drought, right? And when they had built the Ujjain temple magnanimously in 1 year, less than a year, then there was drought at that time. And the city council, they approached His Holiness Bhakti Chiru Maharaj, and they said, "Can you do anything about the drought?" And Maharaj said, "Yeah, we'll have Sankirtan." And at the end of Sankirtan, the newspaper reporters were pressurizing him. I want to know if at the end, will Sankirtan bring rain? Maharaj said, "There will be water," right? And Krishna made the words of his devotee remain virtuous, and sure enough, after 3 days of Sankirtan, continuous chanting, the temple well was the only one that had water in the entire vicinity, and the municipality was coming and taking truckloads and going. There are many instances like this where there was material distress. And what happened? The devotees chanted Harinam and they got rain, right? There was a solution to their material distress. Prabhupada was asked the question, if Calcutta is bombed now, what would you do? If you hear that Calcutta, a bomb is going to drop in Calcutta. Prabhupada said, "I'll continue chanting Hare Krishna." Because what else can you do? If you're going to live or die, chanting Hare Krishna is all auspicious. It's auspicious for everyone around, auspicious for you. We've just heard that by Rupa Goswami saying. Then Srila Prabhupada elaborates by mentioning how the happiness of devotional service includes all others. He elaborates by mentioning the story of Kolavecha Sridhar. Experiencing the happiness of Krishna consciousness, he became disinterested in all other pleasures. Kolavecha Sridhar was a businessman. but not of the category you would imagine him to be. Kolavecha Sridhar was simply selling plantain cups and plates. You know, the banana, if you grew up in Natal, you know banana trees, they have this, they're known as plantain trees, and they come up with this flour. So he would make cups and plates out of that and sell that to people. So his business did not yield a large amount of profits. In fact, he was very poor and he had a measly income coming from this business. So what Kolavecha Sridhar did was that he made a promise that half of his money he will give to worship of the Ganges. He will use in the worship of the Ganges. So half of a measly income was steadfastly reserved for that. So Lord Chaitanya became so attracted by the devotion of Sridhar and his simplicity and his humility that Lord Chaitanya approached him and said, Sridhar, ask for anything and I will grant it to you. Sridhar put his hands humbly together and he said, my Lord, I am happy with my lot right now. I simply want steadfast devotion unto your lotus feet. You ask here about steadfast devotion. So one of the things is that you have to desire it, approach a personality, approach others for blessings, for steadfast devotion, as we see in the case of Kolavecha Sridhar. And so Kolavecha Sridhar got his happiness from his worship, his bhakti, not from gaining anything outside. If you hear the statement that happiness is within you, you can't get it from outside, what does it mean? It means that you are made up of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, bliss, happiness. You are made up of this. And where are you as the Atma? You are inside this shell. So when you look for happiness outside, you say, okay, my senses, my sense of touch needs to feel something good. My sense of smell needs to smell something good for me to be happy. I need to see something wonderful for me to be happy. All external things don't bring happiness. It's an internal awakening of happiness that's already within you that is possible by the process of bhakti yoga. That's how this happiness is also lasting, because you are eternal and it's part of you. The final two references in this section of how happiness in devotional service includes everyone, all others, show that the pleasure of Krishna consciousness includes and excels other happiness. One, any person who has developed even a small amount of devotional service doesn't care a fig for any kind of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, or the 5 kinds of liberation. It is stated that as the personal attendants and maidservants of a queen follow the queen with all respect and obeisances, similarly, the joys of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation follow the devotional service of the Lord. Everything one may separately try to endeavor comes automatically when one surrenders to Krishna. So, surrender is the key or foundational activity that we have to realize and execute in our practice. So, conclusion of this section, Subhada, only devotional service is all attractive, all beneficial, and can develop saintly character and bestow superior happiness. Thus, only devotional service is truly Subhada or all auspicious. Right? So, excuse me. So, moksha lagutakrit. Pure devotional service derides the happiness of liberation. So at the stage of bhava, bhava is the stage before perfection or prema. At the stage of bhava, the third characteristic of pure devotional service manifests, and that is moksha laguta krit, that it derides the happiness of liberation. The happiness of devotional service makes even the inestimable bliss of liberation, moksha, seem insignificant. Then the fourth quality, difficult to achieve. Pure devotional service, as glorious as we've just heard in these last three qualities of its description, even though it is so glorious, it is very difficult to achieve. Very difficult. Why? There are two reasons why pure devotional service is extremely rare and difficult to achieve. One, it's unattainable by one's own efforts. Two, Krishna is reluctant to give it. By one's own endeavor, it's not possible. And Krishna, he's reluctant to give it. Two fingers too short. Your endeavor and Krishna's mercy. Krishna does not mean Krishna alone, but Krishna and Krishna's associates, right? Krishna's paraphernalia. So in order, unattainable ones by one's own efforts, Prabhupada goes on to explain, pure devotional service cannot be attained by any process of self-realization. Even if carefully executed for thousands and thousands of years, Lord Shiva confirms this. My dear Sati, if one is a very fine philosopher analyzing the different processes of knowledge, he can achieve liberation from material entanglement. By performance of the ritualistic sacrifices recommended in the Vedas, one can be elevated to the platform of pious activities and thereby enjoy material comforts of life to the fullest extent. But all such endeavors can hardly offer anyone devotional service to the Lord, not even if one tries for it by such process for many, many thousands of births. Right? So one can follow all the rules and regulations of Vaidhi Bhakti. One can really, put all one's endeavor by trying to develop this by one's own accord. It is not possible because mercy has to descend, we said just before this, right? And how that mercy comes, how the Ladini Shakti comes, how all these auspicious things descend within the heart of the person will be explained in further pages of this glorious work, the Nectar of Devotion. How does this now manifest? So we said it's difficult to achieve. One cannot achieve pure devotional service by one's own efforts. One can obtain Krishna. One can obtain it only if Krishna gives. However, Krishna is very, very reluctant to give pure devotional service because it has the power to control him. Narad's comments to Yudhishthir illustrate the power of devotional service to control Krishna. Narad describes how the Pandavas' pure devotion obliged Krishna to become their menial messenger. When you look initially at that cover picture of Lord Krishna driving the chariot of Arjuna, you know, the position of a rickshawala or a driver of a chariot is not a very high society job, right? But the Supreme Personality of Godhead lives besides the comforts of his 16,108 palaces. And he comes and he takes the humble position of a charioteer of his devotee, being purchased by his devotion. Hence, he's known not by his own name. He's known in association of Arjun as Parthasarathi, Arjun's driver, right? So he's under control of his devotee. His devotee says this way, that way, he'll follow because he's now controlled by that love. This characteristic of pure devotional service manifests at the stage of bhava. Bhava is the shadow of prem, right? It is the rays, it's not the sun, in other words. It is that step just before prem. And right up until the stage of bhav, one can still fall down. Jad Bharat, he fell from that stage, right? Why? Because he decided to act independently. This characteristic of pure devotional service manifests at the stage of bhav. Consequently, one can understand that a person cannot obtain bhava bhakti by any path of self-realization. Even sadhana bhakti does not directly bestow bhav. We just said that. The practice of all sadhana will not give us the goal. It can only be achieved by the Lord's grace. And however the Lord's grace wishes to come via whichever shiksha, diksha, guru, or liberated soul, however Krishna wishes to deposit it in your midst, is according to his sweet will, not our, and it's not up to us. Then the fifth characteristic of pure devotional service is that it is Sandrananda Vishesh Atma, incalculably condensed bliss. Now, you get milk and then you get condensed milk, right? All the richness is condensed in that thick part of the cream of the milk, right? All that you can get in the entire urn of milk is in the cream, like that. So in pure devotional service, you get condensed bliss. At the stage of prema, this is now the perfection of existence. This is now when one has endeavored sincerely and steadfastly on this path, and one has earned the mercy of several Vaishnavas, and Krishna has acted either through the Vaishnavas, the holy name, or himself directly. And he now he awards prema. He allows prema to awaken in the heart of the being. The fifth characteristic of pure devotional service manifests. Sandrananda Vishesh Atma, incalculably condensed bliss. It's incalculable. Why? All things related to Krishna is unlimited because Krishna is unlimited. So the happiness Krishna wants to bestow is unlimited. Imagine falling into an ever-increasing ocean of happiness, right? This is what Krishna is ready to bestow when one has attained the state of prem. Nothing can penetrate metal because its molecular density is so concentrated. Similarly, the happiness of prema is so densely concentrated that nothing else can penetrate it. No other perception or thought can even momentarily register in the devotee's mind. The devotee is not interested in anything else, simply unalloyed devotion to Krishna. One comes to the stage of understanding that simply by pleasing Krishna, watering the root of all causes, all my needs become satisfied, right? All my quests for happiness is awarded in this condensed, incalculably condensed bliss. I mean, what a description, incalculably condensed bliss. You can't calculate it. Why? Because you'll see. Why is it called that? Srila Rupa Goswami is the author of the first reference. And he says, if Brahmananda, or the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme, is multiplied a trillionfold, it still cannot compare to the atomic fraction of happiness derived from the ocean of devotional service. The Sanskrit word for 1 trillionfold is pararida, which means the highest conceivable number. The reference shows that the bliss of pure devotional service is incalculable. It's to the point of infinity. The remaining two references found on page 15 show the bliss of prema bhakti completely eclipse the happiness desired from any other means. One has got no interest in anything else. In that final stage of prema, when love has led you to the personality you've been desiring for so long, all of your senses instantaneously get incalculable amounts of condensed bliss. Your eyes sees, beholds that insurmountable beauty of Lord Krishna, and you can't contain it. You'll simply faint. Your nostrils have never ever smelt anything so glorious as the scent emanating from Krishna. Each of your senses experience the highest amount of happiness. It can't be contained in that state of high bhava that eventually you just have to leave this body, get a spiritual body, and live in that bliss in association with Krishna. Nothing in this world can come close to it. This is the third time Srila Rupa Goswami discusses happiness as a characteristic of Krishna consciousness. Please read for me loudly, Prabhu.
This is the third time Srila Rupa Goswami discusses happiness as a characteristic of Krishna consciousness. There are three stages of pure devotional service: sadhana, bhava, and prema, each characterized by a particular type of happiness. 1. Sugata is the happiness found in sadhana bhakti. It is superior to sense gratification and liberation. Moksha lagu takrit is the happiness found in bhava bhakti. It is so superior that it makes sense gratification and liberation seem insignificant. Sandrananda Sheshatma is the happiness found in prema bhakti. It is so incalculably superior that one cannot even perceive the existence of sense gratification or liberation.
At this point, when one receives this type of awakening by the mercy of Lord Krishna through his Ragatmika Bhaktas, then eventually one's whole existence is considered a success. Then, the last quality of pure devotional service is that it has the ability to even attract Sri Krishna. Prema Bhakti is so powerful that it attracts and controls even the all-attractive Supreme Controller Sri Krishna. One is controlled by attachments. One becomes attached to which gives him pleasure. Only self-satisfied people can remain detached and thus independent. Only self-satisfied people. And what is Krishna? Atmarama. He's self-satisfied, fully self-satisfied. But he is attracted to his own pleasure potency, his own Ladini Shakti, and thus becomes attached to and controlled by Ladini Shakti. So we said the nature of how Ladini Shakti now descends into the heart of the living entity will be discussed in further classes through this glorious work of Srila Rupa Goswami. Krishna becomes, when that becomes manifest in the heart of the living being, Krishna cannot control himself. He's attracted to that person. The essence of Ladini Shakti is love of Godhead, prema. Therefore, one who has prema can attract and control Krishna. Srimati Radharani is known as Madan Mohan Mohini. She's not the attractor of Cupid, but she's the attractor, she's the attractor of Cupid. Cupid, he fell in love when he saw Krishna. He came to shoot his flower arrows of lust to test Krishna. He fell in love with Krishna. But Srimati Radharani, she attracts even he who attracts Cupid. Right? Therefore, she's known as Madan Mohan Mohini. No other process of self-realization has this potency, as confirmed by Lord Krishna's statement to Uddhava. Narad Muni's statement to Yudhishthir, describing Lord Krishna as the friend and messenger of the Pandavas, illustrates how the Lord becomes subservient to the love of his pure devotee. Srila Prabhupada adds, So that was the position of the Pandavas. Although Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, the greatest among all greats, he remained with those royal brothers, being attracted by their devotion, by their friendship, and by their love. This is proof of how great this process of devotional service is. It can attract even the supreme personality of Godhead. And another example our acharyas use in this context is that of Kubja. Kubja was the hunchback in Mathura, and she had the scented oils and the sandalwood that was destined for the great demon king Kamsa. However, when Krishna asked her about it, she said that actually, who could be a better benefactor of these wonderful items other than you yourself? And Krishna became so purchased. This was right in Mathura, outside the palace of Kamsa, his things that were destined for him. When Krishna asked the laundryman said no. He can't give his wares to Krishna and Balaram. Krishna asked the florist willingly gave. Krishna asked Kubja risked her life. And can you imagine the audacity of giving Kamsa's things? How do you think Kamsa will feel if he was looking out of his palace window? She risked that, and she served Krishna in that way. Krishna became so pleased, purchased by that devotion, that first he called her beautiful, and then he made his words come true by lifting her up with his little finger. So what is almost impossible becomes possible when Krishna becomes purchased. That's the power of Krishna's devotion. And in conclusion, when Srila Rupa Goswami described the third characteristic of devotional service, he briefly mentioned that the Lord is controlled by the love of his devotees. The sixth characteristic, Sri Krishna Karshani, also notes that Lord Krishna is controlled by love. Since Sudurlabha manifests at the stage of Bhav and Sri Krishna Karshani at the stage of Prem, we can understand that the devotee's love controls the Lord in both stages. At Bhava, the Lord bestows love of Godhead upon the devotee. Thus, the devotee begins to attract the Lord. At Prema, the devotee verily enters the Lord's pastimes and thus attracts and controls the Lord in a personal and active relationship, as is in the example of the Pandavas. When we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most exalted servants of Krishna, the gopis, where Krishna's statement to them was that they should find solace in their own glorious deeds, because it was not possible for him to repay them for their pure devotion. That's how overpowered Krishna becomes when pure devotion is presented by a devotee. So this brings me to the conclusion of today's class. And it takes me back to, I thought in conclusion, since the story is coming in my consciousness, we'll go back to the point at the beginning of the class about how pure devotional service relieves us from all distress. So one of the items in pure devotional service is Guru Pada Shraya, right? Taking shelter of a pure devotee, like in Srila Prabhupada's case, who is a common denomination for all of us as followers in the ISKCON movement. Srila Prabhupada, he was able to relieve the distress of this one personality that was so surrendered to him, Mr. P.L. Sethi. That Mr. P.L. Sethi lay in a hospital bed hooked up with pipes through practically every organ. His heart was plugged in, his nostrils were plugged in, his hands were tied, his legs was, suspended from the ceiling. So he was in such a situation, and the doctors had put him on life support machine. So his family members had gathered and were preparing for his end, and they called Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada went to the hospital bed of Mr. Sethi, and what he told him? Sethi Sahib, what's all this? Just take it all out and I'll sit here and I'll read the Krishna book for you. And his sons, they said, no, no, Swamiji, the doctor said he'll die, we cannot do that. So Prabhupada said, Seti Saab, you decide. I can sit here and I can read, Krishna book to you. You don't need all of this. Mr. Seti had unflinching faith that you were interested in just now, that we all should be are interested in, I'm sure. He had unflinching faith in the words of Srila Prabhupada. He just kicked out all the things, he told his son, pull out all the things, life support and everything. And Srila Prabhupada sat there and read. Do you know Mr. Seti lived to a grand old age and he only passed away a few years ago? He had steadfast faith in the words of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada could relieve, and by that steadfast faith, he was relieved from all material distress. Can you beat that? That's such an illustrious personality is our link to Krishna as our Param Guru in ISKCON, right? And, he has given us love letters, for people who he didn't know. He sacrificed his time, his health, his money, everything that he had. He gave himself fully for the well-being of you and I. And that's a characteristic of pure devotional service that he had to Krishna, that it benefited others. So I hope that I have left you with something to think about and have inspired you a little bit more to take seriously the love letters of Srila Prabhupada's words in the pages of all of his books, to be your guiding light throughout your existence and in your journey up unto Krishna Prem. Thank you very much. Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any corrections, comments, or questions? Yes, Prabhu? Loudly? Yeah.
Earlier you were speaking about how not even by the son and bhakti, does that somehow, from my misunderstanding, does that somehow discredit Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti?
No. It doesn't discredit Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti because Srila Rupa Goswami is a Rupanuga, right? And he knows the path to Krishna. So he's descended to delineate the path for our well-being. Thereby, he's included it in his books. Just today, I was reading how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, when he was about to leave the body, he had the realization of his service as Nayana Mani Manjari, right? Great personality in his eternal service to Srimati Radharani and Sri Krishna. He has given us, as members of this entire, what he set up to be the Gaudiya Math, which ISKCON is also part of, he has set up his 64 maths, given us his writings, and what he has stressed, also the path of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Why? Because it's a cultivation, right? It's a cultivation. We have to follow so many rules and regulations, and then eventually it leads to spontaneity from our conditioned state. But we can't depend solely on following these rules and regulations and think, like Srila Prabhupada and Srila Rupa Goswami told us in our readings today in class, solely by following Vaidhi Sadhana, we won't get Prem. Prem will descend in Ladini Shakti, will come via a Raganuga Sadhana, Raganuga Bhakta. And Srila Prabhupada one time was asked this question and he said, yes, he's the Raganuga Bhakta. So in our lineage, the big umbrella that we all come under is Srila Prabhupada, right? Who was that Ragatmika Bhakta, who, by whose mercy Ladini Shakti can descend however he wishes, whichever Shiksha, Diksha, or however he wishes for it to reach us. Yes, bro.
Question by Dheeraj.
Yes.
How is it that Lord Nishinadev was in the mood of Lord Chaitanya when Lord Chaitanya was merciful, whilst Lord Nishinadev was ferocious?
Because the fury of Lord Nrsingadev was born out of mercy, right, and compassion for the protection of Prahlad Maharaj, the preacher Prahlad. And next, that question will be more fully answered next week, Friday, when you attend the Lord Nrsingadev Appearance Day class, in whichever yatra or internet class you choose to listen to, or classes. We will be at ISKCON Pretoria, where Nishingananda Prabhu will give the class. It will be recorded and live streamed also. But yes, Lord Nishingadev, it's a very nice discussion. Unfortunately, our time for today's class has come to an end, it being 9:05 tonight. But we park your car in the car park. We park your question in the car park until next week. Anything else? Thank you very much. Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda